focus on the expectations ahead of that release of the quarterly labour force survey amid the alarming rates of unemployment in South Africa. The StatsSA figures for the second quarter of this year do, however, come after the first quarter reading saw a marginal decline in the unemployment rate to 34.5%, but young people remain vulnerable as the youth make up the bulk of the country's jobless masses. Labour analyst Tony Healy joins us for this discussion. Thank you so much for your time, Tony. And I'd like us to first unpack really what is at the core of the QLFS, because many times in South Africa we hear the word jobs and we're already thinking this is definitely one to look at due to the unemployment rate.
Yeah, good morning to me. Absolutely. So the quarterly statistics are important for us because it gives us an indication of how many of the economically active population in the country are employed and how many are unemployed. And the news has been grim for many years, and we must expect, unfortunately, for it to continue to be the case for the foreseeable future.
And it's understandable that we would look at the rate of joblessness due to the high unemployment rate in South Africa. I'd like us to also explore that debate around what it is that is expected by the market this time around following that marginal drop that we saw to 34.5%.
Yeah, look, I think, we've been hovering around the early to mid 30% unemployment rate for a number of years, and we must remember that's a very conservative measure. If we take the so-called expanded unemployment rate, which is a more accurate reflection of the unemployed in the country, our unemployment rate at 40 or so percent is the highest in the world.
Tony, it's also quite concerning that youth unemployment in South Africa continues unabated to increase, and one of the impasses that is usually under the spotlight is the lack of education, breeding skilled workers into a labour market that is not absorbing these young people.
That's right, and there's so many causes for the high youth unemployment rate. I mean, the 15 to 24 bracket, for example. To me, we have an unemployment rate of nearly 2/3. The 25 to 34% age bracket, we have an unemployment rate of about 45%. We must remember that grouping, the 15 to 34 or 35-year bracket, is over half our population. And of that group, there are about 10.5 million, and only 2.5 million of those are employed. So between 15 and 35, we have about 7.5 to 8 million sitting at home, and there are things that can be done and should be done to improve that. And it starts with education. Only 6 in every 100 South Africans that start grade 1 complete matric. So if we could start to address that would already help. Access to technology. Access into TVET colleges. There are things that can focus on labor-intensive industries that require high volumes of labor. All of these are issues, amongst others, that can be done to try and address this youth unemployment issue.
And with all those elements mentioned, Tony, we must also talk about how the calls for strategic or reforms that are radical in South Africa to ensure that the economy grows, thus to create jobs, it must be interrogated where then the country should start, given the consistent inequality that we still live with. Because when we speak of education, till today in 2022, not everyone in South Africa receives the same quality of that education that we speak of, and therefore the domino effect into the privileged finding themselves within the working landscape of the South African labour market, and the poor not.
Absolutely right, and that manifests itself, for example, in the simple process of trying to find a job. You need access to technology, you need access to Wi-Fi, you need to prepare a CV, and the poor have less access to that kind of technology, so that already hinders them. So there is a lot more that government could and should do. And in my view, it's an extraordinary national disaster and it needs extraordinary solutions, and we're not seeing them, unfortunately.
You mentioned extraordinary disaster. What type of figure should we be looking ahead to in the second quarter QLFS?
I really, unfortunately, would not be expecting anything much different to what we've seen in recent years. We see from quarter to quarter there might be a fractional increase up and a fractional increase down. We've seen a couple of fractional decreases in the last couple of quarters. But even if we saw a 5% drop, we would still be the highest. We would still have the highest unemployment rate in the world.
Thank you so much for your time. Tony Healy is a labour analyst talking to us this morning about expectations ahead of the latest quarterly labour force survey to be released by Statistics South Africa this morning.